I was born and I had absolutely perfect eyesight that lasted for all of about 1 second, because we would find out later on that I was born with a degenerative eye disease called macular degeneration. So for one moment I had 20/20 vision, and it started to go away. We didn't notice it until I was in 3rd grade. 3rd grade, when most of my friends are kind of creeping towards the back of the classroom so that they can talk about Nintendo games at the time or which girls had what cooties. I was creeping closer and closer to the front, closer to the front, because I couldn't see the chalkboard anymore. And it's not a big deal. An 8-year-old kid might need some glasses. The teachers went and told my mom, who worked in the school, very easy trip, Mrs. Gustin, we think your kid might need glasses. Okay. So we started going to ophthalmologists, and one after another, they couldn't figure out what the heck was wrong with me because my eyes looked fine. And we eventually ended up with one eye doctor who did his examination, and he sat me, my mom, my dad down. He said, "Mr. Gustin, do you work?" And my dad said, "Yes." And he said, "Mrs. Gustin, do you work?" And she said, "Yes, part-time at the school." And he asked if I was an only child. My parents both nodded yes. And the guy figured it out, or at least he thought he did. He figured out that my eyes were perfect, and I just wanted more attention. Because a normal 8-year-old kid who's doing well in school and plays sports, you know, the greatest way to get attention is to start wearing glasses. Of course. Well, he wasn't right. And my parents knew that. So they finally found a specialist. They brought me to a specialist who brought me in, and after an entire day of poking and prodding and examining and taking pictures of the back of my eyes and injecting me with dyes, came out of his office, sat me down, said, "Mr. Gustin, you have macular degeneration." And it was the first time that we'd heard those words. We didn't know what it meant, and he wasn't going to explain, because as we found out, he told us he was writing a paper on the disease and couldn't tell us anything about it until it had come out. That was my whole diagnosis. You have macular degeneration. So my mom and my dad and I, we ran home, tried to log on to the internet and Google what macular degeneration was, except it was 1985, and there was no internet and no Google. So we had no idea what macular degeneration was, except that I still couldn't see the chalkboard. So we went on with life as it was. We had a name to the disease, and that was it. Now, a couple days later, my parents were contacted by a woman from the state who started off her conversation with them by saying something to the effect of, "We understand it's going to be a burden for you to raise a disabled child. Thanks for your vote of confidence." And she said that your son won't be able to maintain his attendance in regular school. He won't be able to go to high school. He won't be able to go to college. He won't be able to get a job. He won't be able to support himself. She just laid out this doom and gloom. But she said, "We at the state understand, and we will support your son. We'll send him checks every month, make sure he doesn't want for anything." Thanks. Just what I wanted, a life of mediocrity. My parents didn't want to settle for that either. So they kept me in the regular school. In order to maintain my attendance in the regular school, we turned to an organization much like the Miami Lighthouse that had a bunch of amazing volunteers and people that started putting large print textbooks together for me. And that's how I managed to get through elementary school. And as my eyes continued to degenerate and get worse and worse, and I could no longer see the textbooks, we turned to that organization again, and people started coming in one after another to read my textbooks onto tape. I had hundreds and hundreds of tapes in my bedroom. Math, science, English, social studies, everything, calculus. They were reading calculus books, God love them. And they read everything. And I got through high school. I wasn't supposed to make it through elementary school, and I got through high school, and I ended up graduating and going to Boston University, where once again, we turned to a group that started reading crazy books, because my parents were spending $35,000 to $37,000 a year on college, and I figured I might as well get their money's worth. I will study neurological psychology. And these poor people are reading books about the axodendritic connections and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and they had no idea what they were reading. But I did, and thank God for them coming in and helping me graduate Boston University. During my time at Boston University, that's when I first got interested in radio. And I took 2 internships at 2 radio stations, one of them Wayne just mentioned, WEEI, which is where I still work today. And another thing that I did during that time was I got introduced to Rick Dees through a friend of a friend, and he's the morning show host out in Los Angeles who had a nationally syndicated show. And he thought that I sounded a lot like Don LaFontaine, the movie trailer guy. Let me rephrase, the movie trailer guy. He's the in a world guy. And he thought I sounded a lot like Don. So he started having me do movie trailer parodies, where one weekend a movie would come out, and Don would do this weekend, Lake Placid, where it's hard to believe what's in the water. And then 2 days later, I would do a joke about it, would do a parody, and I'd do Lake Flaccid, where there's nothing hard in the water at all. And so, a little notoriety came my way because of that. I started doing some other voiceovers, and I was one of the youngest voiceover people in the country at the time, only 18, 19, 20 years old, and doing national work. And so I decided that I was going to move down to New York after graduating Boston University and become the next big voiceover guy. And I had enough clout at the time that I got a meeting with the biggest voiceover agent at the biggest voiceover agency, and I went down there thinking, this is the next thing I'm going to do. Now, another friend of a friend told this agent about my eyesight. His intention was to say, isn't this cool? The guy's got bad eyes and still does this. But it ended up kind of sandbagging me, because I got into the guy's office, biggest agent ever. I'm super excited to meet the guy. And the first thing he does is throws me a booklet. And he says, this is the first job you would get if I could get it for you. It's showtime. And this is how much copy you'd have to read during your very first session. And he said, how are you going to read it? I know about your eyes. How are you going to read it? And I was like, well, I always carry a pocket magnifier around with me. I have it with me now, little magnifier. And I can look at the text and blow it up, and I have a fantastic memory, and I'll try and memorize it. And he stopped me, stood up, and he said, nope. He said, listen, there's 10,000 people outside that door right now that have as good a voice, or maybe not even as good a voice as you, and what they don't bring to the table is a problem. And he said, you bring a problem to the table, and I'm not going to represent you, and I can't imagine anybody would. So he sent me home. And that was the beginning, middle, and end of my voiceover career. At least that's what I thought at the time. So I went back home, and I did end up, because of my internships and everything I'd done in college and my college degree, I got a great job as the creative services director for 2 radio stations, WEEI and WRKO. Now that, unto itself, should have been a great achievement, considering just a few years earlier I'd been told by someone at the state I wouldn't even make it through elementary school. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to be a voiceover guy. I had this voice. I figured it was for a reason. And I kept at it. I kept trying to figure out ways that I could read copy. And a couple years later, I was doing a speaking engagement at a school for the blind, and I was being walked around by a completely blind instructor who got, of all things to launch my career, he got a text. And the text was read to him by the phone, out loud. And I started thinking, what if instead of trying to read copy off of a page, I had it read to me through a computerized voice? And so I sat down with him, and this again was an organization like Miami Lighthouse that is equipped with the best technology, the best people that care, people that want to help. And I was helped to find the best voices, the best software, the best systems, and the best way to do what I wanted to do. And it took a lot of practice. Excuse me, when you get a computerized voice in your ear saying, "You're listening to the Finsiders, the #1 source for Dolphins news, entertainment, and talk." And then I've got to spit it back like an actual announcer. It was difficult. "You're listening to the Finsiders, the #1 source for news, information, and talk about the Dolphins." It's tricky to convert the computerized voice into an actual voice, but with help from those people and a lot of practice on my part, I was able to do it. Read, copy like everyone else. I was able to get this job with the Dolphins, to be able to work for hundreds of different radio stations. I'm the voice of the NFL on Sports USA, Sony PlayStation, The Dan Patrick Show. You've heard me at some point, I'm sure. And it's because people took time to not throw me in a corner and send me a government check. They gave me the skills that I needed, the tools that I needed, the books to be read got read, the programs on my computer that I needed were found and developed for me. And it's not all easy being legally blind. I mean, my world is this big, as far as I can reach. Anything beyond that, I can't see it, and it's not going to come to me unless I go to it. And that's what Miami Lighthouse is doing. It's expanding the world of these people, making it bigger, bringing it to them, allowing them to work and thrive within it. It almost seemed too perfect as we experienced something today. We were going down the elevator leaving, and a woman stepped in and said, "Miss Virginia, I'm going back to work today." She was completely blind, and Virginia said, "What are you doing?" She said she's going to go back to work as a paralegal. She had no eyesight, and what they did for her at Miami Lighthouse, this woman who lost her eyesight was going back to work as a paralegal. Now, what the state would have done would have stepped in and given her a check and let her sit back and have a mediocre life. But because of the skills and training and everything that she got at Miami Lighthouse, she was going back to work. To me, a challenge is just that, and it's something that's supposed to be overcome. And that's why I wanted to come down here and say thanks to Miami Lighthouse for helping so many people overcome the challenges that they encounter every single day. And I wanted to be here personally to say thank you to all of you. I really, truly, honestly do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic job. Thanks a lot. Fantastic job. Appreciate it.
Amazing story of accomplishment, Pete. Congratulations. That is fantastic.